I'm very pleased to introduce our next speaker, David Reeves. Mr. David Reeves, he lives in the Nashville area and has a creation ministry that's been going on since, I think, 2007, I think he said. And it's reaching millions of people all over the world through all the different media, YouTube and television and other social media, and just an amazing impact that he's having. He'll probably tell you all this, but he has a program on Saturdays that plays in this area. It's on TBN about 1:30, and called Creation now. It used to be called Creation in the 21st Century, and I've been watching these for years. In fact, I record them. They're so good. So I can recommend that program. I think it's a 30-minute program, and he has all the best creation scientists in the world, ones I respect so much. But he's very experienced in paleontology, archaeology, creation ministries, evangelism, you name it. He's been active in that area.
David Reeves has devoted his life to researching and revealing God's fingerprints of design throughout the universe. As president of the largest media ministry in the world, focusing on origin science, David uses his signature combination of science and history to make the Bible and Christianity come alive. His weekly TV show, Creation with David Reeves, airs to hundreds of millions globally on TBN. An expert in science and the Bible, David has authored 2 books and is seen every day on TV, with appearances on the History Channel, DirecTV, TBN, CBN, Newsmax, Dr. James Dobson's Radio, and many more. Garnering millions of views on social platforms, including Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube, David's #1 goal is to impact those he meets with incredible accounts of discovery, biblical accuracy, and science. He shows us that each person is wonderfully made with purpose, a biological miracle from our designer. An award-winning producer, documentary director, and TV host, David has become the most prominent voice for origin science in our age. As an adventurer, David leads dinosaur digs, photo safaris to Africa, expeditions into the Grand Canyon, tours of his museum in Tennessee, geology trips to national parks, speaking tours in Great Britain, films for television, and shares the gospel to millions along the way. David's signature phrase for the past 14 years of ministry has been Psalm 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God. And now, David Reeves.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It is great to be here today, and it is great to be able to share with you, especially in such a beautiful setting. I'm telling you what, I think we hit the leaves right at peak here with all of the color, and it couldn't have been a better setting to talk about God's creation, because that's what we want to do a little bit right now, is talk about how the Bible knows best. Okay, so there's this TV series, and it was a little while back. And even before that, there was an audio serial, an audio drama by the same name. It was called Father Knows Best. And you know what? There's actually a lot of truth to that, but I was chewing that over one day, and I realized that if the Bible is what it claims to be, the inspired Word of God, that it's inspired by the Father himself. So if the Father knows best, then the Bible ought to know best as well, shouldn't it? So what I want to do is I want to go through a number of scriptural references throughout the Bible, and let's ask the question, does the Bible know best? After every verse, we're going to ask this question, and then we're going to dive into the science behind it. Now, before we get going, I do want to set up just a little bit of groundwork. When I say that the Bible knows best, I believe that the Bible is God's word of truth, absolute, authoritative. Knows means to have knowledge of, and best, well, that means it's better than anything else out there. But you see, the word science comes from the word scientia, which means to have knowledge. So when I say that the Bible knows best, I'm not just saying that it knows best when it comes to good advice or history. I'm saying it knows best when it comes to science, when it comes to history, when it comes to prophecy, when it comes to the gospel message itself. So, let's take a look and see what happens. To start with, I'm going to start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. What are we going to do? We're going to start with Genesis 1:1. Now that sounds really trivial. It's kind of simple, isn't it? I mean, in the Hebrew, it says, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In the English, it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Well, I mean, yeah, that's great, but that's not scientific, is it? Well, we find that in the very first verse of the Bible, there are some very scientific features. So does the Bible know best? In the first verse of Scripture, if we broke that down, we'll realize that in the beginning is the origin of time itself. You see, God's outside of time. He's outside of the universe. He doesn't need time. He created time for us to live in. Okay? So we have the origin of time in the beginning. God created the heaven, the origin of space, and the earth, the origin of matter. We're seeing the origin of the three basic components of the entire universe, and we haven't gotten past the first verse of Scripture. So, yes, the Bible knows best. We've gotten off to a very good start. But I might mention that the popular secular theory, probably the one that holds the most attention within the atheistic community, whether it's astronomers, astrophysicists, cosmologists, cosmogonists, they believe in something known as the Big Bang Theory. The Big Bang Theory basically states that about 14 billion years ago, all the matter in the universe was compacted into a very small area, which then rapidly expanded, creating space and time as it went. So you might ask an astrophysicist, tell me how the universe began. Tell me the origin of the universe. Oh, well, David, about 14 billion years ago, all the matter in the universe was compacted into a very small spot, which then began to rapidly expand, creating space and time as it went. Well, can you run that by me one more time? Oh, well, David, about 14 billion years ago, all the matter in the universe, what? All the matter in the universe? Where did all the matter in the universe come from? You see, the Big Bang Theory, that cosmological theory has no response to where the origin of all of the matter in the universe came from. It only attempts to explain how we got time and space. Okay, so is it really a good, robust scientific theory? No, it is not. We'll talk about that more tomorrow night. But what we realize is that while atheistic cosmologies have no response to the origin of the matter, the Bible gives the key to time, space, and matter, giving us the history of its origin, and we find it in the very first verse of Scripture. So yes, we're off to a very good start. Now let's flip on over to Jeremiah 8. Jeremiah 8 says, the stork in the heaven knows her appointed times, and it talks about the turtle dove and the crane and the swallow. So I want to talk about a bird for a minute. I want to talk about swallow. This one's a sea swallow, and it's called the Arctic tern. Now, there are about 1 million of these things around the world, scattered around the world. These birds, they live about 20 to 30 years, and they mate for life, and they take a particular course when they migrate. So they're following warmer weather when they migrate. But let me just show you, all right? So they might start in Greenland or the Netherlands, somewhere way up here, and then they pick a path down the western coast of Africa. Now, once they get to the southern tip of Africa, they turn and they go eastward as far as Australia, New Zealand, and then they turn south again, and then they spend their summers, our winters, in Antarctica down there. They're following the warm weather because when it's really cold up where we are, down here, it's warmer. So now they're spending a little bit of time in Antarctica, but now it's time to move north again. So what do? Well, obviously, they just follow the same path. No, often they take an S-shaped path up the coast of the Americas to find their way back to their starting position. But I don't know if you guys have noticed, this is a world map right here. That is no small journey. These things are traveling tremendous distances. In fact, we can track their distances. About 56,000 miles every year. How many of you were paying attention? How many years do they live? 20 to 30, that's right. So let's just do the math. That means that we're talking about a bird that travels about 1.5 million miles in their lifetime. Do you think they have really good frequent flyer points? But these birds, does the Bible know best? Do these birds know exactly where to go, what to do? Does the sea swallow know how to find its way back after traveling 56,000 miles? Yes, it does. The Bible knows best. Let's look at another one. Psalm 139 says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are thy works. And this is King James English, and this is actually Southern English if y'all listen to the phraseology. And that my soul knoweth right well. So does the Bible know best? Well, actually, the most complex computer ever designed was built in just 9 months. Yeah. Has anybody got one of these things? Really, really sophisticated. It's an iPhone. Yeah. Samsungs, I'm sorry, they're not. No, I'm not talking about our cell phones. The most sophisticated computer ever developed was built in just 9 months. I'm talking about the human body, the human brain. 100 billion neurons communicating with about 100 trillion cells in our bodies right now at about 250 miles per hour. You know, our bodies are more sophisticated than the entire World Wide Web. The brain is a supercomputer. The body is an engineering marvel. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. Yes, the Bible knows best. But then let's take it a step further. Psalm 139 also says, and listen to this language. You tell me if you see a repeating pattern here. Thine eyes did see my substance, yet being unperfect, and in thy book all my members were written, which in continuance were fashioned, when as yet there was none of them. There's all of this language about a written book. Well, we actually do have a written book inside each and every one of us. It's called DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. It's an information language system that is so complex that geneticists will tell you that there are trillions upon trillions of combinations that make up just human DNA, our book, our blueprint. Well, when we realize that you can express DNA just like a written language and you can write down your book, so you can actually sequence what's inside of you and write it down. Well, we've done that. And guess what? Your entire DNA sequence would fit in about 1,200 encyclopedia volumes. That's a lot of information. That's one big book. 1,200 encyclopedia volumes just to write out the information that's inside of you. Oh, but maybe I forgot to mention something. Because you see that 1,200 encyclopedia volume, that can be found in nearly every cell of your body. That means there's enough information in each and every one of you to fill up the entire Library of Congress many times over. Are any of you suddenly feeling a little bit more wonderfully made when you realize just how complex we are? I tell you what, it is inspiring to me to realize that the Bible knows best. DNA is completely one of a kind. Your iris and your retina contain unique patterns, and no two palm prints are alike. Now, no two fingerprints are alike, and I want you to look at your thumbprint right now. Look at the thumbprint. It's very unique. There's another one different from that on the other hand, but look at that thumbprint. Nobody else on earth has that. You know what? That makes you thumb-body. The Bible knows best. I was researching for my second book, and I said, well, I'm going to put in all the verses that, just really impacted me that show the scientific authority of the Bible. So I get to this verse right here, and I'm reading it. The life of all flesh is the blood thereof. And I'm like, oh, no. No. I must be missing something. The life of all flesh is the blood. What am I missing? I know the Bible knows best, but I also know that not all creatures contain blood. There are creatures that don't have any blood, but the Bible has to know the best. It has to be true. So I must be missing something. What am I missing? What am I missing? What am I missing? The word flesh. And then the more I research, the more I realize that yes, some creatures don't have blood, but the same creatures that don't have blood don't have flesh. The ones like sea sponges and things like that. So not only does the Bible know best, but it is very particular, very specific in the way that it writes these things. Sounds like the Lord had a plan. So the Bible knows best. Bloodletting was a very common practice in colonial times. The average adult human contains about 160 ounces of blood. And that sounds kind of trivial. Why should I know that? 160 ounces of blood inside of me? No big deal. Well, it's no big deal unless you're George Washington. Because in the hours before George Washington died, they took out 125 ounces of his blood. They took out nearly all of his blood. They took out his life. Because we know the life of all flesh is the blood thereof. Let me tell you about another one. So I've been to Israel about a dozen times. I'm going to share some of that with you tomorrow. But I've worked in many archaeological excavations with the Israeli Antiquities Authority, and I have picked up, I cannot tell you how many pieces of pottery. I mean, Israel is so rich with history that everywhere you step, you're stepping on pieces of pottery, broken shards, and things like that. Well, every time you pick up a piece of pottery and you look at it, I can guarantee you 99 times out of 100, that piece of pottery is unglazed. Okay? Why is that important? We'll learn in a second. Leviticus 11:33 says, "Every earthen vessel whereinto a dead thing falls, whatsoever is in it shall be unclean, break the pot." So if a dead animal falls into a pot, an earthenware pot, break the pot. The very next verse says, wait, well, if it's clothing or something you're not going to be eating out of, wash the pot, use it again, it's okay. But if you're eating out of it, break the pot. So why do we just have a vindictive, mean God trying to put these little bitty rules and regulations on his people, the Israelites, to see if he can get them to break them so he can punish them? Or maybe the Bible knows best. You see, up until the 1800s, we didn't know about things like germs, did we? Until a Bible-believing Christian, a creationist by the name of Louis Pasteur comes along, and he pioneers germ theory. Well, he says, well, maybe these ideas of all of these scientists were wrong for years, and maybe there are germs or microbes. See, before that time, everybody believed in the miasma theory. You know what the miasma theory is? It's the idea that the Black Death and cholera and other communicable diseases were caused by poisonous air. And that was the scientific theory of the day. And Louis Pasteur comes along and he's like, well, maybe there are actually little living microbes that are contaminating things. And so he pioneers germ theory. But before that, they didn't know about it. So why does God say, break the pot? Unglazed pottery. You remember I told you, 99 times out of 100, it's unglazed. It's not sealed, which means the germs, the microbes, the diseases from that animal that died in that pot have seeped into the porous, earthenware nature of the pot. And the very next person to eat out of that pot, they're going to catch those diseases. So God says, break the pot. Again, the Bible knows best. Thousands of years down the road, we find out that the Bible knows best. Maybe we should have trusted it from the very beginning. Instead of questioning it just because science doesn't match up, back in the 1800s, you bet they would have questioned something like that because it didn't match up with what they believed was science, the science. We've heard a lot about that lately, haven't we? All right, but this was during a time when doctors would wear operating gowns full of the blood and bodily fluids of their past patients because, look at me, I have a lot of experience. I've worked on a lot of people. Don't you want me to work on you? And they're passing on the diseases. If only we would trust what the Bible says. Dealing with contagious or transmitted diseases, Leviticus 13, by the way, says, if you've got something like that, get out of the camp. In other words, quarantine yourself away from the public. Don't quarantine the public. I think we may not have followed that advice over the last few years. The Bible knows best. Job 40 talks about a creature called Behemoth. Behemoth is this creature, he says, I made him with you, Job. He eats grass like an ox. His strength is in his loins. His force is in the navel of his belly. Many Bible commentators said possibly an elephant. He's got a lot of strength in his belly. But then it says that he moves his tail like a cedar tree. I don't think that's going to be able to be moved like a cedar tree. So maybe it's not an elephant. What is it? What is it? Well, maybe you've seen in the headlines in the past few years in Argentina, they're digging up some of these large titanosaurian sauropods, Dreadnoughtus, 140 feet long, some of them from head to tail. And look at that tail. Could that have been swayed like a giant cedar tree? Yeah, that's massive. We're here at Wildside at the Legends Resort. We are about to load up on four-wheel drives and go off on photo safari. We know that they have a lot of wildlife here, and we're hoping to catch as many of the big five as we can. So let's load up and see how many we can find. So we've already seen one of the big five. We're going for two right now. However, there are giant, long-necked dinosaurs that fit the description of behemoth in the Bible. It is far more likely that God was referring to the largest land animal ever created, the sauropod dinosaur, as behemoth. I'm telling you what, though, elephants here in Africa are an amazing sight. They remind us of God's creation. Their giant ears are shaped almost like the continent of Africa, and on top of that, their ears are very large, and they help radiate excess heat from the sun in the African plains here. So, truly an amazing creature, and they should remind us of God's incredible design. So, in other words, the Bible knows best. Let's look at Job 26. Job 26 says that God stretches out the north over the empty place, and he hangs the earth upon nothing. Interesting. See, there were some ancient cultures, the ancient Hindus and other cultures, that believed that the earth was a flat pancake-like disc that was sitting on top of the bunch of a giant elephants. Yes. And these elephants were standing on top of a massive turtle, and the turtle is floating in a huge pool of water. That's what suspends the earth. Everybody knows that. I mean, that's the scientific theory, right? No. But this was taught as science. This was popular culture until we ask ourselves the question, does the Bible know best? Does the earth hang upon nothing? Well, since that time, there are little things called satellites and space probes and all of these types of things that have been able to look back on the earth and see the blackness of space all around it. God hung the earth upon nothing. The Bible knows best. 2 Peter 3 talks about a worldwide flood, a world that was overflowed with water, a world that completely perished other than those who were on the ark. The global flood account in Genesis 6 speaks of a deluge that literally reshaped the planet. It was a catastrophe. You wouldn't have wanted to be there. But if the flood literally changed the face of the earth about 4,000 years ago, well, there should be a lot of evidence, shouldn't there? So does the Bible know best? Well, let's look at a few things. You see, small-scale catastrophism has been observed to form geological formations very rapidly. In fact, Mount St. Helens, which blew up in 1980, taught us a lot about small-scale catastrophism. Basically, in 1980, when Mount St. Helens erupted, it sent a dust cloud, an ash cloud, and it laid down all of these little thin, finely gradiated layers, which then 2 years later in 1982, there was another smaller eruption, and it caused a mudslide. And this mudslide came crashing down the mountain and carved right through those layers in a few hours. What many secular geologists may have said took, millions of years if they had to guess, if they didn't see it with their own eyes. So, when we look at things like Mount St. Helens, when we look at things like the Grand Canyon, we see this in great detail. I won't get into too much detail about the Grand Canyon today. We'll talk about that more tomorrow morning. But I will share with you a very short story of an experience that I had filming this documentary, Secrets Beyond the Rim. We produced this. It's in post-production, and we expect it to get a 600 theater release, one-night showing next year. So be praying about that. It's really big. We shot it all on location at the Grand Canyon. It should be very, very powerful for God's glory. But in the midst of filming all of this, I'm standing at Lee's Ferry. This is the starting point of the raft trips down the Colorado River, okay? And I'm talking about the formation of this canyon, how it may have been formed very, very rapidly during the flood. Well, I finished filming, and I noticed that there's a lady loading up a raft over here, okay? So I said, well, I'll just go see what she's doing. So I walk over to her, and I'm like, what you doing? She said, oh, I'm loading up my raft. I'm getting ready for a 16-day journey down the Colorado River. We're going down the whole Grand Canyon, 16 days. And I was like, whew, 16 days, that's great. I don't even know if I could do that whole thing, but that's good for you. She said, what are you doing? And I was like, that's good, that's good. You know what? I'm actually filming a documentary on how this canyon may have been formed very rapidly over a short period of time with a lot of water. And she said, no, okay. And she goes back to loading her raft. Opportunity to witness busted, I guess. Oh, well, we'll try again sometime. But in my peripheral vision, I see this tall, lanky fella come storming up. And he had been listening to our conversation from a Jeep in the distance. And he said, did I hear you say that you think that this thing formed over a lot of water in a short period of time? He said, my PhD is in geology. Uh-oh. I said, well, yes, I actually do think that there's a lot of evidence to suggest that this canyon was formed very shortly with a lot of water. And he said, no, this canyon, as you see right here, this formed over 6 million years of slow, gradual erosion from this river right here, cutting through it, forming the canyon walls as it went. And I said, well, I understand that you believe that. Is it okay if I ask you just a couple of questions? He said, oh, certainly, anything, tell me. And I said, well, have we ever seen a canyon form from a river rushing through it over 6 million years of erosion, forming like this that we see here? He said, well, no. We as a species haven't been around for 6 million years to observe that. So of course we haven't seen that happen. I said, but you still believe that it took 6 million years of slow gradual erosion from this river to form the canyon, right? He said, well, of course I believe that. I said, could I ask you one other question? Oh, certainly, go right ahead. I said, well, is there any simulation that we can do in a lab or a test or some type of a way to observe how this might have happened over 6 million years of slow gradual erosion from this river creating this canyon right here? And he said, well, no, there's no test we can do or laboratory simulation or anything like that. I said, but you still believe that it took 6 million years of slow gradual erosion from this river right here? Of course I believe that. I said, well, of course you believe it by faith. And he said, well, of course no. 2 questions. And a PhD in geology realized that what he had been told, what his professors had told him, was a faith-based belief that was not empirical, it was not observable, it was not repeatable, it was not demonstrable, it did not follow the scientific method, yet he blindly believed it by faith. Is that science? No. So when you realize that there are just simple questions that you can use to witness to people to show the ridiculousness of this theory, it becomes pretty obvious and it becomes pretty neat. Because you know what? I guarantee you his mind wasn't changed that day. But the next 16 days traveling down the Colorado River looking at those rocks, he had a lot of time to think about that conversation, didn't he? You never know. You never know. All right. Another evidence of a massive catastrophic flood is bent strata. And bent strata is found all over the world, including at Doe River Gorge. That's right. Right here on site. We have examples of smoothly folded and bent strata layers, making nice smooth bends, more extreme than this in some cases, just right up the road. If the rain stops over the next few days, we're going to take a hike and we're going to go visit that site. And I'll show you some of the places where you can actually see this bent and folded strata. That's evidence of a catastrophe. I was in British Columbia speaking on a one-week speaking tour, and after I got through showing this picture, another man came up to me, someone in the audience, and he said, David, you know, I live here in Canada, and right up the road, there's another example of this. I'll just give you the picture if you like. And he gave me this picture. Again, bent and folded strata is found all over the world. Let's talk about its formation for just a second. Because you see, what we have here are lithified layers of sediment. Sediment is stuff that was laid in, usually brought in by water, and then that sediment, those layers of sediment, lithify, they harden into a rock, okay? And then they bent. All right, well, I've brought an example. And this is a piece of plywood. This is a piece of plywood which is multiple layers of wood, and those layers of wood are cemented together. They're glued together, okay? So this is going to be our little test, our little scientific demonstration, because I want to show you just how easy it is to bend and fold hard layers like this over millions of years of slow, gradual pressure. Wait a second, that didn't work. I'll do it again. Really smooth fold like you see here. We just got to, over very slow amounts of time, put pressure on it. No, that didn't work. Hang on, let me. We could try this experiment 10 times, 100 times, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, and we would always get the same result. It fractures, it breaks, it doesn't smoothly fold. So how do you create smoothly folded layers? You fold them before they turn to stone. While they're still mud layers that were broken apart in Noah's flood when the fountains of the great deep broke open and tremendous amounts of mud and sand and silt and sediment are breaking out, washing and eroding, and then washing across the continents in tsunami-like waves, laying down layer after layer after layer of sediment. And then the massive pressures and the tectonic movements that were going on during the flood started to push against these plates, and it started to buckle the rock before it turned to rock. It started to buckle these soft sedimentary layers, and then they turned to stone. I can't wait to show you some of the stuff that's on site, because I was excited yesterday to be able to take a look at that and just to see how spectacular it is. In other words, smoothly folded layers are examples of God's flood. Coincidentally, if you ask a secularist, they'll say, yeah, you know, David, if you thrust those layers a few miles down below the crust, the heat and the pressure get so great that it will actually smoothly fold those layers. Well, that is actually true. But it's so hot and it's so much pressure that it turns it into igneous or metamorphic rock. It completely changes the composition. It doesn't look anything like this. So the only way to explain it is the flood. The same thing with polystrate fossils. This is a tree, a fossilized tree standing upright in the middle of a cliff face. That cliff face is 20 or 30 feet tall just at this point, with a 20 or 30 foot tree running through it. It was featured in National Geographic in 1975 and then lost to the public for many, many years. Well, I was able to track it back down, bring a film crew out there, document it, take these pictures. But what we realize is that this is actually very powerful evidence here, because if you were to just hide the tree for a second, just don't pay any attention to the tree. Let's just take a little snapshot of the cliff, and let's take it to a secular geologist, and let's say, how did this cliff form? So they're just looking at the rock layers. They don't know about the tree. This cliff, that's probably 1 million years. That's probably about 10 million years for that cliff to form. Slow, gradual erosion. Oh, really? And then you show them a picture of the tree. Well, how does a tree stand upright for 10 million years while dirt slowly forms around the base of it? By the time the dirt is up this far, the tree would have rotted and fallen over. Trees don't stand upright for 10 million years waiting for dirt to cover them, I'll tell you that. So how did it form? You know what? Even the most devout, and I say devout because it really is a religion, even the most devout atheist in the world will then instantly change their mind. And they'll say, David, we're sorry. No, actually what we're looking at here is the result of a local flood. Yeah, we find these in Germany. We find them in Nova Scotia. We find them in Scotland. We find them in my backyard in Tennessee. This is in Tennessee, y'all. These trees are found all over the world. So billions of local floods are one big catastrophic event that buried this thing so quickly and then turned it to stone. I would say that the Bible knows best. I'm going to pass this around. This is an actual chunk of a stigmaria. I picked this up personally from near that tree. The stigmaria is the root section off of one of these lycopods, lepidodendron or lepidiflora trees, that's going through the cliffs. This is an actual piece of root from one of those trees. Pass it around, and then hand it back to the front when you get through. So you're touching a piece of flood history right there. Let's move on, because we know the Bible knows best when it comes to geology and the flood. What about Isaiah 27? Isaiah 27 talks about Leviathan, a dragon in the sea. Job 41 says, "Canst thou draw out Leviathan with an hook? None is so fierce that dare stir him up. His breath kindleth coals." That's some pretty bad breath right there, by the way. "And a flame goes out of his mouth." Now, when you say a flame goes out of his mouth, then all of a sudden the skeptics in the room, they light up and they're like, "David, you believe in a fire-breathing dragon? That's what you're telling me? A flame goes out. Oh, sure." Well, does the Bible know best? Such a horrible creature as Leviathan, surely we would have seen something like that. Well, you see, the bombardier beetle is still extant. It still exists today. I have friends who collect them. The bombardier beetle is a beetle alive today that has little chambers in its abdomen. And it has two different chemical components in its abdomen. So it keeps them separated in two different places of its stomach. Well, it has a cannon in its backside. And when this beetle feels threatened, let's just say a spider comes up and tries to attack it, or an ant comes up, and it feels really threatened. Here's what it does. It aims that cannon in its backside, and it finds that spider, and then boom, it shoots a scalding hot chemical liquid at the attacker to repel. The best way to show you is just to show you. Watch this. Look at this. So tweezers come in, it acts like it's going to attack the beetle. Boom, just like that. The beetle fires its defense mechanism and it gets away. Let me show you that one more time. This is really good. Check this out. Watch the precision. Look at this. It knows exactly where it's being attacked, and it lets out that scalding hot chemical component. Well, that's because at that very moment, it takes those two chemicals in those two different chambers in its stomach, and it mixes those together in a catalyst in a mixing chamber, which then causes a chemical reaction, making this scalding hot chemical concoction that it then sprays out of its backside, out of a cannon. All right, how does that happen by chance? But we won't get into that. What if Leviathan had one other component? Maybe it had chemicals that could be lit on fire, and it had an igniter in its mouth that would ignite those chemicals as it's expelled. You got a fire-breathing dragon, don't you? So just because we think that a fire-breathing dragon sounds like fantasy, if the Bible says it's true, the Bible knows best. And one day we will discover, maybe not in this life, but one day we will figure it out and we will know what this creature was. But you know what? If it's so fierce that none dare stir him up, throw spears at him and it just bounces off. Something that big and that ferocious, it should have been found by now. We're going to talk about it more tomorrow, but in Kansas, in far western Kansas, I lead dinosaur digs, paleo digs, every year. And we dig up creatures like 50-foot long marine dragons, dragons of the sea, that match the description of Leviathan in so many different ways. I can't wait to share more tomorrow on that creature. Needless to say, the Bible knows best. So, let's look at another one. This is maybe one of my favorite, because I'm going to tell you the story of Matthew Fontaine Maury, the pathfinder of the seas. His story goes something like this. You see, he was extremely ill one day, and he's lying in bed. And his daughter takes a Bible, and she comes into the bedroom. She sits down in a chair next to the bed, and she says, "I'm just going to read you some scripture here. I'm going to try to comfort you, something to make you feel better." And he's like, "Okay, that'll be good." So she turns to Psalm 8. "What is man that thou art mindful of him, and the son of man that thou visitest him? For thou hast made him a little lower than the angels, and hast crowned him with glory and honor. Whatsoever passeth through the paths of the sea, O Lord, our Lord, how excellent is thy name." And Matthew sat up in bed, and he said, "Wait a second, read that again. Paths of the sea? Paths of the sea." He said, "I'm a naval commander. If the Bible says there are paths in the sea, if I ever get over this illness, I'm going to make it my life's effort to find out what the paths of the sea are." Guess what? He got well. And as a naval commander, he devoted his life to charting the ocean currents and the paths in the sea, paths that ships still follow to this day. Let me show you a picture of these paths. Tell me, does the Bible know best? This is a world map. You can see America's in the center there, and you've got Africa over here on the right-hand side. Look at the orange and green lines. All those tiny little lines are charting the ocean currents, the paths of the sea. You know, there's a monument in Virginia in Matthew's honor. It says, to Matthew Fontaine Maury, the pathfinder of the seas, the genius who first snatched from the oceans and atmosphere the secret of their laws, his inspiration, Holy Writ. In other words, the Bible knows best. This is so far, Bible's stacking up pretty good to the good science test, isn't it? Merriam-Webster defines religion as a cause, a principle, or a system of beliefs that is held to with ardor and faith. Let's talk about what atheists believe for a second. See, atheists believe a lot of things. Atheists believe that the universe started in a non-guided Big Bang about 14 billion years ago. Atheists believe that over time, over billions of years, stars coalesced from gas clouds to create all of the stars in the universe. Atheists believe that humans evolved over chance and time from non-living creatures, life from non-life. You see, the key ingredient here is atheists believe, because none of those things that they believe is observable, repeatable, demonstrable using good science. See, nobody saw a universe began 14 billion years ago, did they? That's impossible. Nobody has ever seen a star coalesce from a gas cloud over millions of years, because it would take millions of years to potentially see this happen. And we'll talk about the mechanics of that tomorrow night in my astronomy session, but needless to say, we've never observed it. So they believe in that. And we've never seen life come from non-living matter. That's pretty ridiculous. It is kind of ludicrous. It's pseudoscience is what it is. So atheists believe that, though. But wait a second. To be a religion, these beliefs have to be held to by faith and ardor. Each one of those is a faith-based belief, not based on observations, empirical science, and try to go up to your professor and question Darwinian evolution, or the Big Bang, or any of these things. Oh, you'll find out pretty quickly. They hold to it with ardor, with extreme fervor. They will not let you get away with questioning the doctrine of all of these principles. What does that make evolution? Let me briefly, I'm going to go to astronomy as we wrap up, but let me briefly talk about a couple other things, and maybe we'll have time to take a couple of questions as well. I've written a couple of books. I want to make sure you get 21 Verses Backed by Science. We'll do that tomorrow. I'll get the box out of my car. Every Saturday, 1:30 Eastern Time on TBN, I host a TV show called Creation. If you have a Roku, if you have an Amazon Fire TV, if you have internet, we have Genesis Science Network. We formed this about 5 years ago. Genesis Science Network is a 24/7 TV network dedicated to the Bible, dedicated to science, but from a Christian perspective. It's the only thing like it of its kind. It's like the Discovery Channel for Christians. I love the Discovery Channel. I love National Geographic. I love Animal Planet. I love all of the science they use and the facts they use, and then they get to the very end of the thing, and then they say, and all of this happened over billions and billions of years of natural selection. And I'm like, why can't we give our Creator glory for His creation? So, my brother and I formed this network a few years back, and it has not stopped since. It's 24/7 all over the world. Download the Roku app, download the Amazon Fire TV app, or watch it online at GenesisScienceNetwork.com. We receive salvation reports from this network. We have had so many amazing testimonials. People who said, we never had the means or the opportunity to attend a college or a university, But we've always wanted to learn more about science. And Genesis Science Network, with these PhD documentaries and these movies, these nature documentaries, and family shows, all from a Christian perspective, it's given us that opportunity to learn what we've always wanted to learn. So it's been a major blessing for many people. Be sure to check it out. You can also go with me next September, that should be 2022, to Kansas, and I will teach you how to dig up dinosaurs. In fact, I see a couple of people in the audience here that were actually with me a few months ago, and one of them's right here, and one of them's right here. And his brother is right over here, and I'm expecting you to join me next year. Is that a deal? Okay. In Kansas, we're finding some of the most remarkable things. I'll share more in tomorrow's session. You can also go with me to Africa, June of next year. I lead tours there every year, and we get as close as we can to the wildlife. It's pretty spectacular. If you do not already receive it, how many of you know about the Creation Club magazine at all? Probably very few in this room. Yes. Okay, so I see a couple of hands, and that's it. The Creation Club magazine is 100% free. We send it out every other month. It has articles, it has science experiments and articles, children's activities, and it's absolutely free. So what I'm going to do is tomorrow I will have a little blue card sitting here for you, and any family that wants a copy of this delivered to their mailbox free every other month, just put your information on that blue card, and I will make sure you get it. It's called the Creation Club magazine. Our YouTube channel, we've had many views on our YouTube videos. We have about 450 videos on our YouTube channel. If you are ever south of Nashville, Tennessee, visit the Wonder Center in Lewisburg. We have exhibits on animal biology. We have observatory class telescopes. We have churches bring in bus loads of people to view the studios, to view our Tower of Babel exhibit, to view full-size dinosaurs, to view Bible history exhibits, manuscripts dating back to the 1100s, 1,000-year-old Torah scrolls. We have movie premieres there. We have special presentations there. Come visit it. It's the Wonder Center in Lewisburg, Tennessee. It's not that far. I drove there to come speak to you. So the least you can do is drive there to come see me. Visit the creationsuperstore.com. It's something that my brother and I, we started a nonprofit, a 501c3 ministry, thank you, about 14 years ago, I guess, and 2007. And a few years later, we put together a website called the Creation Superstore. It's kind of ambitious. I mean, the Creation Superstore, it's just a little online store. Well, in a few years' time, it has turned into the largest Origins-related store in the world. We do stock, sell, maintain, ship out over 1,300 books and videos, anything and everything that anybody and everybody has ever published, videos or books, on creation science. So go check that out, creationsuperstore.com. If you're into Facebook, you can also follow us there. We do post daily on Facebook, and we also have millions of views on TikTok. That Chinese platform is a gold mine for witnessing. And over the COVID season, I said, well, I'm just, here's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to film one of these things. And I did a 60-second video talking about science in the Bible. Well, all of a sudden it went viral. And then the next one went viral. And then the next one went viral. And now, 3.5 million views later, we're still going strong. So what have we talked about? We've talked about the origin of science, the origin of time, space, matter, the Arctic turn, blood is life, paths of the sea, break the pot, earth hangs on nothing, Behemoth and Leviathan are real creatures, geology confirms a global flood, and so much more. There's so much I could not get into in the limited time tonight. But before we end, I wanted to end on astronomy because that's one of my passions. In fact, it's the thing that brought me into ministry. I love astronomy. And I have a passion, a hobby, of astrophotography. And it began when I was 17 years old, when I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. But I knew that I had a passion for astronomy. And I started connecting cameras up to the back of these big telescopes to try to see if I could take a picture of what I could see through the telescope. This was one of the first pictures that I got. And my jaw dropped to the floor because I'd always seen these pictures in space magazines for many, many years, and I'd always said, yeah, they doctored that up. It can't look that good. But then I took it for myself, and the blues, the purples, the reds, and all of it, it's real. And I said, oh, why? Why am I keeping this to myself? Why could I not use this as a witnessing tool to talk about God's glory and to talk about the gospel itself? You know, Psalm 19:1 says that the heavens declare the glory of God and the firmament shows his handiwork. It says that day after day utters speech and night after night shows knowledge, but there's no speech nor language where their voice is not heard. So the heavens are shouting out at us that there is a grand designer, so much bigger than we could possibly imagine, who cares about us. It's shouting out that you're not star stuff, the result of 14 billion years of chance. You're not an animal. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. You're made in God's image. He cares about you. So this is what got me going. So I want to end with this. I want to have one more Bible knows best moment. Genesis 15 says, look now toward heaven and tell the stars if you're able to number them. Now for this, I need a couple of volunteers. Can I have a couple of volunteers? Thank you. Can you come here? Here's what I'm going to have you do, if I can find it. Okay, this is not as exciting as the snakes and animals that Michael will be showing you later. But anyway, this is what I need y'all to do. Can you take a handful? And can you take a handful and make sure that everybody in the room has one of these? Can you do that? Thank you. Just pass it out to everybody you see. And I'm going to take one myself. And you need to know what it is as you grab it, because this is a miniature telescope. Now, I know a lot of people, you're looking at it right now and you're like, David, no, I think this is a coffee star. No, it's not. This is a miniature telescope, okay? And it's going to be really, really important in just a moment. So the more I took these pictures of space and the more I realized the grandeur of the universe, the more I was in awe of our Creator. The heavens declare His glory. It's everywhere we look. So the passage in Genesis 15 says, look toward heaven, tell the stars if you can number them. Do you know we've tried to do that? We've tried to number the stars in the observable universe. Best estimates so far come to about, I think it's about 10 sextillion stars. That's a 10 with 21 zeros after it. Now, I personally believe, I've done a lot of study on this, I'm pretty sure it's 10 sextillion and 1, but we're not going to quibble over that. No. This is just in the observable universe, just the ones we can see. We can't see the ones we can't see. So there's a lot more out there, but 10 sextillion just that we know about. So I think it's safe to say that, yeah, there's no way to number the stars. It's estimated that for every grain of sand on every beach or desert of the world, you pick that grain up, and there are at least 1,000 stars for that grain of sand. Pick another one up. 1,000 stars. That's just the ones we know about. That's a big universe, isn't it? So I think it's safe to say, Jeremiah 33, the host of heaven can't be numbered. Now, let's take our miniature telescopes. Thank y'all. Let's take our miniature telescopes. And here's what we're going to do. It's a star field on the screen, okay? The Hubble Space Telescope took a picture of space. And this has been a few years ago, but they decided, they said, we're going to do this upright. We're going to point to a dark area of the sky in between two stars, and we're going to take a long exposure photograph of that space. Their picture was just as big as you can see through your miniature telescope, not held up here, don't do this, at arm's length. Hold it up to the screen, try to look through that little tube and find a star. It's going to be very difficult to do. But if you find one, now move in between two stars to a dark area. Okay, this is the tiny speck that they focused on. And they took a long exposure photograph. For 11 days, they kept accumulating light in that tiny speck where they couldn't see any stars. And after 11 days, through that tiny speck that you can see through your miniature telescope, this is what they saw. 10,000 galaxies. Not stars, galaxies. Each galaxy containing several hundred billion stars. I think the Bible knows best. You know what? Not only does the Bible know best, but that kind of leads me to awe because it reminds me of another passage. I think this one's in Psalms. What does it say? Oh, yeah. God knows exactly how many stars there are, and he calls them all by name. So the heavens declare the glory of God. I'm going to leave you with an analogy, and then we maybe take a few questions, but I'm going to leave you with an analogy. Hebrews 3 says, every house is built by some man, but he that built all things is God. Does the Bible know best? You know, imagine you're walking through a clearing, through a wooded area one day, and you happen upon this beautiful clearing, and there's a nice log cabin sitting there. And this log cabin is so picturesque, you're like, oh man, I just got to get a picture of this. This is really good. And then you start to think, and you're like, I don't see anybody around, and I don't see any civilization around, so I wonder how this happened. You know what? I bet you millions of years ago, there was a tornado that tore through the forest right through here. And of course, when it started knocking down the trees, it knocked down the trees in the shape of the cabin's walls, obviously. And then I'm thinking that a couple of million years later, there must have been a sandstorm, and that blew through. It piled up with sand all around the exterior walls of this cabin, and then lightning struck the sand. Well, we all know what happens when lightning strikes sand. It makes glass. So there's the glass panes of this beautiful cabin sitting here. And then a few million years later, I'm thinking about, about 500,000 years ago, there must have been one more big windstorm, and it blew away the sand, and it just left this cabin sitting here, beautiful, exposed for us to view. Obviously, that's how it came to be. No. We would all laugh at that. In fact, every secularist would laugh at that. And they would say, David, everybody knows somebody built that cabin. It didn't just happen. There was intelligence behind that cabin. What does the Bible say? Every house is built by some man. If it is obvious that somebody took a lot of effort to put all of this together, that somebody took a lot of effort to put that cabin together, then what else is even more obvious? That he that made all things, including you, everything in the natural world, he is God. Design requires a designer. Creation requires a creator. And who is that creator? Jesus said in the New Testament, he said, have you not read that he which made them at the beginning made them male and female? And then he said, you know what? If you don't believe what Moses said here in the book of Genesis and the first few books of the Bible, if you don't believe what Moses said, why should you believe me? Guess what? Moses was writing about me. Wait, that's the Old Testament. No, what is it? Oh yeah. Jesus Christ is the creator. You go to the New Testament and it tells us that he made all things. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Without him was not anything made that was made. And guess what? That same God loved us so much that he became flesh and came down to this earth to live, die, and be raised again in payment for our sins, so that we could be a part of his family for eternity. He left the grandeur, looking down at that beautiful universe that he had created, and instead cared so much about us that he reduced himself to flesh in order to save us. Now that's pretty special, isn't it? So in a world that shuns absolutes, I'm here to tell you that the Bible is absolutely true from beginning to end, and the Bible does know best. That's all I have to say tonight. I hope you'll join me tomorrow. And I'm going to take a few questions. So Genesis is the first book of the Bible. It's written by Moses. And the first verse of Genesis says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. And it says, the earth was without form and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the water. So you've got the Spirit now, all right? You've got God, but you've got a Spirit hovering over the face of the waters, right? And then we also know from the New Testament that Jesus created all things. So we see the whole Godhead portrayed in the first chapter of the Bible. So Genesis holds the whole history of the universe, and it's really, really important to understanding everything else. Because today we're attacked as Christians. Everybody, people will come up to me when I speak at a conference or when I speak in a church, or they come up and they say, David, that was good information. We just want you to know we don't need it. And I'm like, I understand what you mean. Okay, I'm a Christian. I have faith. But here's the difference. It's not a blind faith. The evidence is literally all around us. All we have to do is open our eyes. And if we miss using some of these amazing examples of God's creative power and design, then we're missing some of our greatest witnessing opportunities that we could possibly imagine. So we don't need to shy away from this. We need to use it for everything for God's glory. A lot of people say, a lot of skeptics come up and they're like, David, on TikTok especially, you got the young atheists on TikTok. They say, David, you know what? You just believe in this collection of ancient fables written by goat herders. Have you heard that one? To which, you know what I reply? Oh, you've got a portion of that correct. I do believe in a collection of writings written by ancient goat herders and ancient poets and ancient kings. And those poets and goat herders and kings didn't know a thing about science, yet they got the science 100% correct. How could that be? Unless through divine inspiration. The Lord provided those people with the words to write down so that thousands of years down the road, it is 100% true historically, 100% true scientifically, 100% true prophetically, and 100% true when it comes to the gospel message itself. And that's encouraging. So, beginning to end, Genesis to Revelation. The first book that I wrote was called Wonders Without Number. That was mostly on astronomy. Shares some of my astrophotography. It's based on a verse in the book of Job. Job's going through a pretty difficult time, okay? And he's not feeling so good. And there's a passage in the book of Job that says that God does great things past finding out, yea, and wonders without number. And I read that verse and I was like, whoa, this is so true. God has done great things past finding out. He's done some things that we can't figure out in this life, right? We'll know one day. We can't figure out in this. They're past finding out. They're so great. And wonders without number. So, wait a second. Yeah, he's done some things we can't figure out, but he's also done an innumerable number of wonders that we can study. And in the scientific world, we can research, and we are faced with two opportunities. Give him the glory, or say, what time and chance has accomplished is so magnificent. No, there's only one true possible thing, and that's to give God the glory for it. So it's called Wonders Without Number, based off of a verse in the book of Job. Favorite location to visit, like geographically, like around the world? Everywhere I've been. That's hard to pin down. Okay, that's a good question, but it's hard to pin down, so I'll just throw it out there. As far as biblical history, Israel. As far as history and architecture, Italy. As far as raw beauty, Greece. As far as feeling closer to God than you can possibly imagine, up there in the Swiss Alps, where nobody else is, and you look at that landscape, and you're like, oh my goodness, I just feel like I can reach out and touch. So those are a few of my favorite things. People that you meet online who say you can't trust the Bible because it's so old, you go back to the exact same things that we've been discussing tonight. You're like, I know it's old. It's really, really old. But it has never been proven inaccurate, scientifically, historically, prophetically, in any way. So how could such an old book be so accurate unless it had some help from somebody who wasn't human, like somebody outside the universe that knows the answer to all things, including how he created the laws in physics that governs the universe? So you just go right back to it and you say, I agree with you. The Bible is an old book. but boy, is it right. And there's a little book called 21 Verses Backed by Science, and you can see how it's right in 21 different ways scientifically. No, it's a short book. 21 Verses is a short book. It's about 50 pages long. And if you're interested in witnessing, I have a bulk. I mean, you can get it for about $1 a piece or something like that. If you want to hand it out to friends who might be skeptics, family members who might have questions, co-workers, college classmates, anything, it is a nice little book to kind of pique somebody's interest because it's all about science, but it's about how the Bible is accurate in science. Short story, how do you deal with academia's age? The radiocarbon dates. Well, carbon dating is actually a believer's best friend in many ways, because what most people say is carbon dating proves that the earth is millions and millions of years old, to which you reply, no, it doesn't. Carbon dating, if there's any carbon found in the sample, then it means that it is only thousands of years old. C14 can't last millions of years. So when somebody says carbon dating proves that the earth is ancient, they don't know what they're talking about. Now, if they say radiometric dating proves that the earth is billions of years old, there are some radiometric principles like potassium, lead, rubidium, strontium, it's different other radiometric dating techniques that do supposedly give these billions of years, but they're full of assumptions, okay? So that's the easiest response, is to say, nope, carbon-14 actually proves my point. I'm glad you brought it up, right? So we use these things in a way that makes them understand, hey, I don't even know what I'm talking about. I've always been told, my professor told me that carbon dating proves the earth is millions. It doesn't. It proves that it's only thousands. There are a lot of good Christian people in the church who say, well, I mean, my professor told me it's millions of years old. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I still believe in Jesus. But the easiest thing to do there is to point out the inconsistencies. Because Jesus said, have ye not read that so if they're a Christian, you say, well, let me just tell you something Jesus said. You tell me what you think this means. Have ye not read that from the beginning, God made them male and female? So I want to ask you a question. As a Christian, when do you think the beginning was? From the beginning, that word right there. And they're going to say, well, probably Genesis 1, the thing that says, in the beginning God created the heaven. Okay, no, I would agree with you there. So when it says, from the beginning God made them male and female, if there are billions of years between the origin of the universe, Genesis 1:1, and male and female, do you think that sentence goes well together? That God made male and female in the very beginning. Now, if it's only separated by a few days and it's part of the creation week, that's not a problem for us, is it? But it's kind of inconsistent to believe in massive ages, and not only is it inconsistent, it's not needed. The only reason the time is needed is to allow enough time for magical principles of evolution to occur. Miraculously make the universe, because we believe that he miraculously came to this earth. He was raised from the dead miraculously, that he does miracles, and that he created us with a purpose. One of those purposes is to give him praise and glory.